I spent 40 years learning the language of fire. I know how it breathes, how it feeds, and most importantly, I know the lies it tells when someone forces it to speak. When I retired from the department as a senior arson investigator, I promised my late wife, Sarah, that I was done with destruction. I wanted to build things, not sift through what was left of them. That's why I poured my entire pension, every dime of the safe, comfortable life money, into the workshop on the edge of town. It was a beautiful space. Old brick, high beams, and the smell of cedar and oak that hit you the moment you walked through the door. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. I had my lathe set up in the corner, the bandsaw I'd restored by hand, and a wall of chisels that Sarah had bought me for our 30th anniversary, polished to a mirror shine. It was perfect, but in my line of work, you learn that perfect is usually the calm before the disaster. It started on a Tuesday, a day that felt wrong from the moment I woke up. The air was heavy, that distinct mid-July humidity that sticks your shirt to your back. I remember drinking my coffee, black, no sugar, the way the guys at the station always drank it, and looking at the clock. 7:45 a.m. I was running late. My nephew, reckless but charming Justin, was supposed to meet me at the shop at 8 to help me unload a delivery of black walnut. Justin was my sister's boy, a kid who had bounced between get-rich-quick schemes for a decade before finally coming to me for a real job. I wanted to help him. I wanted to believe he'd changed. When I turned onto the gravel road leading to the workshop, I didn't see the building. I saw the smoke. It wasn't the white, puffy smoke of a brush fire. It was black, oily, and thick, choking the morning sky. My stomach dropped. A sensation I hadn't felt since I stood outside a burning warehouse in '98. I slammed the truck into high gear, gravel spraying, and roared toward the gate. By the time I skidded to a halt, the fire trucks were already rolling up their hoses. The roof was gone. The beautiful brick walls were scorched black skeletons. My lathe, my tools, the unfinished rocking chair for my granddaughter, all of it was just a smoldering heap of ash and twisted metal. I sat in my truck for a full minute, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The smell hit me through the vents, acrid, chemical. It didn't smell like burning wood. It smelled like betrayal. A young firefighter, a kid who couldn't have been more than 25, walked over as I stepped out. He looked tired, soot smeared across his forehead. "You the owner?" he asked, pulling off his helmet. "I am," I said. My voice sounded calm. Too calm. It was the voice I used to use when I had to tell a family they'd lost everything. "What happened?" "Looks like an electrical fault, sir," the kid said, gesturing toward the back corner where the breaker box used to be. "Old wiring in these places is a ticking time bomb. Probably a spark jumped, caught some of that sawdust you got everywhere, went up like a matchbox. I'm sorry, there wasn't much we could save." I nodded, looking past him at the smoking ruins. "Electrical," I repeated. "You sure about that?" "Pretty sure," he said, wiping his face. "Captain marked it as accidental. We'll have the official report for your insurance in a few days." I watched him walk away. I watched the trucks leave one by one until it was just me and the silence of the dead building. They saw a tragedy. They saw bad luck. I stepped over the caution tape and walked into the ash. Before I tell you what I found in that wreckage that turned my grief into cold, hard rage, I'd love to know, where in the world are you right now, and what time is it? Comment below. Your comments help this story reach the people who need to hear it. Stay vigilant. I moved through the debris with a muscle memory I thought I'd lost. Most people see chaos in a fire scene. I see a map. Fire travels up and out. It leaves a V pattern pointing back to its origin. The kid was right about one thing. The heaviest damage was near the breaker box in the northeast corner. The heat there had been intense enough to spall the concrete floor, popping chips off the surface. But something was wrong. I crouched down, ignoring the heat radiating through the soles of my boots. I brushed aside a layer of wet black sludge. If this was an electrical fire, the burn patterns would be consistent with a slow smolder that grew over time. The wood near the origin point would be deeply charred, alligatoring in large rolling blisters. That's not what I saw. The charring here was deep, yes, but the line of demarcation, the border between the burned and unburned floor, was too sharp, too clean. And then there was the smell. Underneath the stench of wet ash and ozone, I caught it. Faint, sweet, aromatic, toluene. It's a solvent found in paint thinners, but also used to make fires burn hotter, faster. You don't get a toluene smell from an electrical short. You get it when someone pours the accelerant. I stood up and looked at the breaker box. The door was blown open, the wires fused together. It looked convincing. If you were a 25-year-old firefighter with 10 minutes to make a call, you'd say short circuit and go home to breakfast. But I stepped closer. I pulled a pin light from my pocket and shined it into the fused mass of copper and rubber. There, wedged behind the main bus bar, was a small blackened clear plastic fragment. It had melted, but the shape was distinct. It wasn't a wire nut. It wasn't a fuse. It was the casing of a timing device, cheap, digital, likely from a kitchen timer. This wasn't an accident. It was a staged scene. Someone had set this up to look like a failure, timed it to go off when the building was empty, and used an accelerant to ensure total destruction. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Who hated me enough to do this? Or who loved money enough to destroy my life? I walked back to the entrance, my mind racing. That's when I saw the tire tracks. The ground had been soft from rain 2 days ago, and while the fire trucks had churned up most of the yard, there was a patch of mud near the side gate that they had missed. I knelt down. The tread pattern was distinctive, aggressive, off-road tires with a unique jagged sipe on the outer edge. I knew those tires. I had paid for them. 2 weeks ago, Justin had come to me, begging for an advance on his pay to fix up his truck. "I need new tires, Uncle Marcus," he'd said, giving me that winning smile that reminded me so much of his mother. "Safety first, right? You always say that." I had written him the check. $1,200. I stood up slowly, the world tilting slightly on its axis. Justin, my sister's boy, the kid I was trying to save. He knew the layout. He knew I wouldn't be there until 8 o'clock. He knew the building was insured for replacement value, a policy I had just updated last week, with him sitting right there in the office as a witness. He thought he had committed the perfect crime. He thought he was smart. But he made one fatal calculation error. He thought he was burning down a workshop owned by a retired old man who liked to whittle. He didn't know that for 30 years, I was the guy the state called when they needed to know exactly how a fire started. He didn't know that I had sent men to prison for less than a melted piece of plastic and a faint smell of toluene. He didn't know he was playing with fire. I took out my phone and photographed everything. The tread marks, the spalled concrete, the plastic fragment. Then I walked back to my truck. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police would take weeks. They'd need warrants, evidence processing, interviews. I needed to look my nephew in the eye. I drove to Justin's apartment complex, a rundown block on the south side. His truck, the lifted black Ford with the new tires, was parked in the lot. I pulled up next to it. I looked at the tires. Fresh mud, caked deep in the treads, and caught in the rear wheel well, a tiny singed piece of pink fiberglass insulation. The same pink insulation we had installed in the workshop ceiling 3 days ago. I sat there for a moment, watching his window. I could see the blue flicker of a TV screen. He was in there, probably sleeping, probably dreaming about the cut he thought he was going to get from the insurance payout. I wasn't just angry, I was cold. A deep Arctic freeze that settled in my chest. I reached into my glove box and pulled out my old field recorder. I checked the battery. Full. I got out of the truck and walked up the stairs. I didn't knock. I pounded. It took Justin almost a minute to answer the door. When he finally did, he wasn't bleary-eyed or confused. He was fully dressed, jeans, a hoodie, and boots. He looked like a man who was waiting for a phone call, not a man who had just been woken up by his uncle. "Uncle Marcus?" He blinked, blocking the doorway with his body. "What are you doing here? Is it 8 already? I must have slept through my alarm." He was a bad liar. I'd interrogated suspects who had burned down apartment blocks for insurance fraud, and they all had the same tell. They talk too much. They fill the silence because silence makes them think you can hear their heartbeat. "It's gone, Justin," I said, letting my shoulders slump. I made my voice crack, pitching it to the tone of a broken, defeated old man. "The workshop. It's gone." "What?" He stepped back, ushering me in. The performance began. "What do you mean, gone? Like a robbery?" "Fire," I said, stepping into his living room. It smelled of stale pizza and anxiety. I scanned the room without moving my head. Car keys on the table. A muddy pair of gloves tossed carelessly on the floor near the kitchen island. "Total loss. The fire marshal thinks it was the wiring." Justin let out a breath that sounded like relief, though he tried to mask it as shock. "Oh my God. Uncle Marcus, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. But nobody was hurt, right?" "No. Nobody was there." I sat heavily on his couch, burying my face in my hands. I watched him through the gaps in my fingers. He wasn't looking at me with sympathy. He was looking at his phone, which was vibrating on the coffee table. "Well," Justin said, pacing a tight circle, "thank God you're insured, right? I remember we went over that policy last week. Replacement value. You'll be able to rebuild bigger. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise?" There it was. The rush to the payout. He wasn't mourning the loss of the family business. He was calculating his cut. I decided to deploy the weapon I'd been saving. It's a technique we used in interviews called the void. You drop a piece of information that destroys the suspect's narrative and watch how they scramble to rebuild it. I looked up. Tears. Real ones, born of fury, in my eyes. "That's the worst part, Justin. The insurance won't cover it." Justin stopped pacing. He went dead still. "What? Why not?" "The policy update," I lied. "The agent called me yesterday. There was a clerical error with the bank routing number. The premium didn't go through. The policy lapsed at midnight on Sunday." The color drained from Justin's face so fast it looked like a plug had been pulled. This wasn't disappointment. This was terror. Pure, unadulterated panic. You have to be joking," he stammered, his voice rising an octave. "You have to fix that. Call them. Tell them the check is in the mail. You can't just lose everything, Marcus." "It's done, son," I said, standing up slowly. "I'm ruined. I'm going to go home and try to figure out how to sell the land. It's all I have left." "No!" Justin grabbed my arm, his grip desperate. "You can't just give up. You have to fight the insurance company. You have to—" "I'm tired, Justin," I said, pulling away. "I just wanted to tell you so you didn't drive out there for nothing. Don't worry about coming in today. There's no work." I walked out. I didn't look back. I knew exactly what was going to happen next. I got into my truck, drove around the corner, and parked behind a dumpster where I had a view of the complex exit. I didn't have to wait long. 3 minutes later, Justin came sprinting out of the building. He jumped into his lifted Ford, the engine roaring to life with an aggressive snarl. He was driving fast, reckless. I followed at a distance. In my arson days, I learned that a panicked suspect rarely looks in the rearview mirror. They are too focused on the disaster in front of them. He led me out of town, past the industrial park, toward an old salvage yard on County Road 9. It was a place known for stripping stolen cars and moving things that people didn't want found. My gut twisted. This wasn't just about Justin needing money for truck parts or rent. You don't burn down a building for a few $1,000s unless the alternative is worse. He was in deep. Justin pulled through the chain-link gates of the salvage yard. I pulled onto the shoulder 100 yards back, grabbed my binoculars, and slipped into the tree line. Through the lenses, I saw Justin parked next to a silver sedan. A man got out of the sedan. He was tall, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit, with the posture of a man who used violence as a transaction. I recognized him. Tony the Vice Vargo, a mid-level loan shark who operated out of the back of a pool hall downtown. He was known for two things: high interest rates and breaking the fingers of people who didn't pay. Justin was waving his arms, screaming. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. He was explaining that the money wasn't coming, that the accident hadn't worked. Vargo didn't scream. He just listened. Then, calmly, he reached into the back seat of his car and pulled out a tire iron. Justin backed up, his hands raised in surrender. Vargo stepped forward and swung the iron, smashing the headlight of Justin's precious truck. Justin flinched but didn't run. He was trapped. I watched as Vargo grabbed Justin by the collar and slammed him against the truck door. He leaned in close, speaking low and hard. Justin was nodding frantically, tears streaming down his face. Vargo released him, pointed a finger at Justin's chest, and then pointed toward town. Justin scrambled back into his truck and peeled out, mud flying. Vargo stayed behind. He pulled out a phone and made a call. I lowered the binoculars. The picture was complete. Justin owed Vargo money, a lot of it. Vargo had likely suggested the insurance scam as a way to clear the debt. Now that the policy lapsed, Vargo wanted his money another way, or he wanted to silence the loose end. I rushed back to my truck. I had to get to Justin before he did something even more stupid, or before Vargo decided that a dead nephew was better than a broke one. But as I turned the key, my phone buzzed. A text message. From Justin. I'm sorry, Uncle Marcus. I can fix this. I'm going to make it right. My blood ran cold. Making it right, in Justin's mind, usually involved gasoline. I texted back, Justin, stop. I know about Vargo. Don't do anything. No reply. I slammed the truck into gear. I knew where he was going. If he couldn't get the money from the insurance, he was going to try to get it from the only other asset I had left, my house. Specifically, the safe in my study where he knew I kept my emergency cash and the deed to the land. But he didn't know about the security system I had installed myself, and he didn't know that I was done playing the victim. I wasn't driving to save my house. I was driving to save my nephew from himself, and to spring the trap that would end this nightmare once and for all. My house sits on a hill, accessible by a long, winding driveway that I paved myself 10 years ago. It's isolated, surrounded by heavy timber, beautiful in the daylight, but a fortress at night. As I roared up the incline, I killed my headlights. I didn't want Justin or anyone else to know the warden had returned. I saw Justin's truck parked haphazardly on the lawn, the engine still ticking from the heat of the drive. The front door of my house was ajar. The lock jamb was splintered. He hadn't even tried to pick it. He'd kicked it in. Panic makes people sloppy. I reached under my seat and pulled out the Remington 8.7 I kept for pest control. I racked a shell into the chamber. The sound, clack clack, is a universal language. It means the negotiation period is over. I moved silently through the mudroom. I could hear him in the study. The sounds were frantic. Drawers being ripped out, papers flying, the heavy thud of metal on metal. He was trying to force the safe. It was a Liberty Colonial, rated for 1,200 degrees and sledgehammer attacks. He wasn't getting in there with a pry bar, but he was desperate enough to try. I stepped into the doorway of the study. It's a relocker, Justin, I said, my voice low and steady. If you hit the dial with that hammer again, the internal bolts will seize up. You'll never open it. Justin spun around, the pry bar raised like a weapon. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, sweat dripping off his nose. He looked like a cornered rat. "Uncle Marcus," he gasped, his chest heaving. I just need to borrow it. The deed, the cash. I'll pay you back, I swear." "Put the bar down," I said, keeping the shotgun leveled at his waist. "You don't understand," he screamed, tears mixing with the sweat. "Vargo, he's going to kill me. He said if I don't have 20 grand by tonight, I'm dead. You have to help me." "I tried to help you," I said, the sadness heavy in my throat. "I gave you a job. I gave you trust. And you burned it down, literally." Justin froze. You know?" "I knew before the ashes were cold," I said. "The toluene, the timer, the tracks, and the insulation in your wheel well. I have it all, Justin. It's not in the safe. It's in the hands of the state police." That was a lie. I hadn't called them yet, but I needed him broken. The pry bar clattered to the floor. Justin sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't want to hurt you," he sobbed. I got in too deep. The gambling, it just spiraled." "That's how fire works, son," I said, stepping into the room. "It consumes everything until there's no oxygen left." I was about to tell him to stand up, to face the music, when the motion sensor light in the driveway clicked on. Twin beams of high-intensity LED headlights cut through the window blinds. A car door slammed. Then another. "Is that him?" I asked. Justin looked up, his face pale as death. "He followed me. Oh God, he followed me." I moved to the window and peered through the slat. It was the silver sedan. Vargo and a second man, a heavy-set guy I didn't recognize, were walking up the driveway. Vargo had a gun in his hand. "Get in the corner," I ordered Justin. "What?" "Get in the corner behind the desk and stay down," I barked, the drill sergeant in me taking over. I didn't have time to be the betrayed uncle anymore. I was the protector. That's the curse of men like us. Even when the people we love hold the match, we still try to put out the fire. I stepped out of the study and into the hallway, positioning myself behind the heavy oak grandfather clock that faced the front door. "Marco." Vargo's voice drifted in from the porch, mocking. "Come out, kid. Daddy's here to collect." He stepped through the broken door, his gun raised. The second man followed close behind. "That's far enough," I said. Vargo spun toward my voice, raising his pistol. Boom! I put a round of birdshot into the ceiling directly above their heads. Plaster and dust rained down on them, blinding and deafening them in the enclosed space. "Next one is buckshot," I yelled, pumping the action. Clack, clack. "And it won't be in the ceiling. Drop the weapon." Vargo was a bully, not a soldier. He was used to scaring kids and desperate gamblers. He wasn't used to a pissed-off arson investigator with a tactical position. He dropped the gun. It hit the hardwood with a heavy thud. Okay, old-timer," Vargo yelled, hands up, squinting through the dust. "Just business. No need for this." "Get on your knees," I commanded. "Face the wall." They complied. They always do when the power dynamic shifts that violently. I kept the shotgun trained on them and pulled my phone from my pocket. I dialed 911. "This is Marcus Thorne. I have 2 armed intruders held at gunpoint at 420 Oak Ridge, and I have an arson suspect in custody." I heard a noise behind me. Justin was standing in the doorway of the study. He looked at me, then at Vargo on the knees, then back at me. "Uncle Marcus," he whispered. You saved me." "I saved your life, Justin," I said, never taking my eyes off Vargo. "But I can't save you from what comes next." The police arrived 10 minutes later. It took 3 hours to process the scene. They took Vargo and his heavy on assault and weapons charges. They found the tire iron with Justin's paint on it in Vargo's trunk. Then they came for Justin. Watching them handcuff my sister's boy was harder than watching my workshop burn. He didn't fight. He looked at me as they walked him to the cruiser. I'm sorry, he mouthed through the glass. I stood on the porch until the taillights disappeared around the bend. The house was quiet again. The adrenaline faded, leaving only the ache in my joints and the hole in my heart. It's been 6 months since the fire. Justin is serving 5 years for arson and insurance fraud. I visit him every second Sunday. We talk through the glass. He looks better, sober, clear-headed. He's taking a carpentry course in the prison vocational program. He says he wants to build things the right way when he gets out. I told him we'll see. Trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, you can glue it back together, but you can still see the cracks in the reflection. I rebuilt the workshop. It's smaller this time, just enough for me. I put in a state-of-the-art fire suppression system and cameras that cover every inch of the property. But the biggest change isn't in the building. It's in me. I used to think that if I provided enough, if I loved enough, I could keep the people around me safe. I thought my experience protected me from being a victim. But the truth is, the most dangerous fires aren't the ones started by faulty wiring or lightning strikes. They are the ones started by the people we invite into our homes, the ones who smile at us across the dinner table while hiding a match in their pocket. Systems fail when we ignore small cracks. I ignored the signs with Justin. The erratic behavior, the mysterious phone calls, the desperation in his eyes, because I wanted to believe the best. I let my love for him blind my instinct for survival. Don't make that mistake. Love your family. Help your friends. But never, ever deactivate your internal alarm system. If something feels off, if the story doesn't add up, if the behavior shifts, if you find yourself making excuses for someone else's disrespect, pay attention. Fire needs 3 things to burn: heat, fuel, and oxygen. Betrayal is the same. It needs opportunity, motive, and your silence. Don't give it oxygen. This is Marcus, signing off. Check your smoke detectors, check your locks, and most importantly, check your circle. Stay safe out there.
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.